Welcome to a realm where personal growth meets expansive spirituality and where we're not just scratching the surface. We're diving deep, widening our perspectives, and having a darn good time doing it. This is the Enlightened Podcast, and I am your host, Jen Hamilton. You'll enjoy an infusion of motivation, empowerment, and inspiration that will resonate in every aspect of your life. Expect captivating stories, heartfelt musings, and my own personal experiences. But that's not all. I'm bringing awe-inspiring individuals to the table, so get ready to meet some remarkable souls whose wisdom and stories will leave you spellbound. No topic is off limits here. Brace yourself for raw authenticity, unfiltered vulnerability, and yes, the occasional splash of explicit language. We're delving into the realms of the esoteric, mystical, and the woo-woo, unafraid to explore the extraordinary. So if you are ready to venture beyond the surface, to explore the depths of your soul, and to awaken the magic of life, if your heart says yes, then hit that play button and let the Enlightened Podcast guide you on this remarkable expedition. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Enlightened Podcast. I am your host, Jen, and my guest today is Eva ZobianWolf. Eva is the founder and CEO of Eva ZobianWolf. She is dedicated to supporting chronically exhausted nurses through her holistic wellness approach. She combines her expertise as a mind-body specialist, nurse, and adaptive yoga therapist to create personalized mindfulness plans and transformative sessions. Eva helps her clients reduce stress, increase energy levels, improve sleep, and rediscover their inner vitality. She not only provides individualized support, but also aims to make a difference on a larger scale by assisting nurses and enhancing their overall well-being by offering nursing continuing education as part of her coaching program and workshops. Eva's approach encompasses various modalities, including adaptive yoga therapy, Reiki, and other mindfulness-based practices. With over 2 decades of experience in the medical field, Eva brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise to her clients. I'm so excited for you to hear this eye-opening conversation that we got to have. So without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, Eva. Welcome to the Enlightened Podcast. How are you today?
I am fantastic. How are you?
I'm amazing. And we were just talking before we just hit the magical record button. You and I are just in some kind of weird little warp here because you're over in Texas. And I just had a big thump on my door before I jumped on this interview with you. And a poor kookaburra had gone full kamikaze and flown into the door. And then I jump on the call with you. Tell us what's just gone down for you today.
Oh, we're having all kinds of weird weather in Texas, and there was a mild tornado that touched down just 2 miles from my neighborhood, and not something that we typically get here in Texas.
It's wild, isn't it? We don't get, well, look, we do occasionally get tornadoes here in Australia. Very rarely. I don't think I've ever had one. I think I've seen one in Brisbane, where I am. But we have them, we have cyclones in sort of more of the tropical areas, and we get really big thunderstorms. But I guess you watch movies like Twister and stuff like that, and you just, when you think of tornadoes, you think of just whole things just being completely wiped out. And
And it was powerful, but it was very short-lived. So hopefully that's the worst that we have this weekend. We're supposed to have a lot of
Fingers
storms.
crossed. Yeah, fingers crossed that's all done. Now, you're a mind body specialist. Tell us about the magic that you bring to this world, Eva.
Oh, well, this is something that has just been really just such an amazing experience. I started out as a nurse, I've been in the medical field for over 20 years, and I started I started looking for things that I could do outside of work. And one thing I'd been wanting to do for the longest time was become a yoga teacher. Well, I was really fortunate in that I found a yoga therapist that all of her training was in alignment with bringing you through to the yoga therapy certification. And with that, it's tapping into and listening to what is happening inside of your body. Every one of us is unique, and what works for one person may not work for another person. And I'm helping people to tap into that physiological conversation so that more of the things that they do in their life are in alignment with what works for them, what benefits them. And it can be something as simple as listening to the foods that you digest, or paying attention to when you should be waking up in the morning, and then including breath-centric movement in that, and potentially meditation. So it's a really fun experience that I'm really excited for all of my clients that are able to feel more joy and happiness and more satisfaction in their life.
I love it. What was the catalyst moment for you that you were like, I need to step into this. I need to do this?
It was the first time that I had a client in a very short period of time, we're talking less than 2 weeks, tell me how many improvements had happened in their life, the changes in their sleep, the changes in their personality, and the way that they had less pain in their body when they were moving. I mean, there's been more stories along those lines, things where a client didn't need pain injections any longer and was able to avoid surgery. But definitely when I started hearing that from my clients, that was the whole reason I went into the medical field. And being able
Mm,
to do that with just a 30 or a 60-minute session with a client a couple times a week it was profound.
And so tell us about the modality that you use.
So I use yoga therapy, and my background is in physiology, anatomy, and then nursing. And I incorporate that into the yoga training, the yoga teaching that I use, and really leaning into the therapeutic benefits of a yoga practice. So for a lot of folks, they think yoga and they're like, oh, well, I can't twist my body and make myself into a pretzel. And immediately I say, don't worry, I've got scoliosis, so I'm right there with you. You know, there's days where I can touch my toes, and then there's days where there's a lot more pain in my body, and that just doesn't happen. However, I use my yoga practice, I use movement, focus, meditation, but I also use things like Reiki and tapping into the chakras and leaning into Ayurveda and Vedic counseling to be able to do this whole holistic uh, enterprise that I'm co-creating with the person. And so the
I
more they
love
give
it so
me,
much.
the more information they give me, the more fine-tuned it is, and the more it's really centered around them specifically.
And are you still nursing?
I do it periodically. So I do a lot of volunteer events where I'm working with different folks as medical support, doing bike medic for different charity rides, and things like that. So I still use that in my practice, in how I'm working with my clients, and then periodically I'll work as a nurse for a little bit, and then I come right back to yoga therapy, and that's really where I feel like I'm making the most um, impact. But I'm also
Mm,
working to help nurses, because right now nurses are suffering horribly. Um,
mm,
if you listen to any nurses that are working in the medical field, they're exhausted, they're overwhelmed, they are, well, quite frankly, they're pissed off.
We got the same
There's
thing here.
yes, and that's the things it doesn't matter if you're talking to folks in England, in Europe, in Australia. The healthcare system is suffering horribly.
It's fucked. Let's just call a spade, Eva. It's fucked.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I 100% agree. And so I am creating continuing education workshops using yoga therapy and nursing background to help nurses be able to lean into more of the self-care and figure out how to create calm in the midst of chaos.
And it's so needed because nurses are just really not acknowledged enough for what they do. Like the nurses are the backbone of the medical industry, really. My mum was a nurse, so I saw a lot, for her as I was growing up. And, when, she was, clinical on wards and then working in mental health. And she went on to do her master's in counseling, and she works in drug and alcohol counseling now. So still in that mental health space. And it's really interesting because in the spicy flu time, in COVID times here, like our nurses were everything. We needed them so much. And then when the mandates came in for the vaccines, it was almost like a big almighty fuck you. That they were forced to, or that they had to lose their jobs over it. And I knew quite a few people that lost their jobs over it because they weren't comfortable getting it. And look, that's not a debate to be had at this stage. I mean, we could definitely go there. I could do a whole rant on that one. But you know what I mean? Like our nurses were our pride and joy on the front line, and then they were just kicked to the curb. And then what happens is so many people walked away from nursing to do other things. And then what happens when you've got a shortage of nurses? Then what? There's such overwhelmed staff. They're under-resourced. They're underfunded. And that stage, when we're in, COVID times and borders were closed, they weren't even bringing in internationals either, because we used to have a lot of internationals come in to do nursing. Or so many underqualified people in these roles. And it's just where the whole system fell apart here, which is really, really sad. And there's a lot of people that haven't even gone back to nursing since they've dropped the mandates as well here, because it's like, well, fuck you, like, and they've had to go out and find other work, or they've stepped aside and gone, actually, what else do I want to do with my life? And whether that's going down the path of, I know someone, that's studying naturopathy and herbalism and nutrition and, other coaches as well. They become coaches because, they're supporting nurses through this transition. And, one of the things that I saw with, a beautiful friend of mine in her nursing career is that she had to leave because of the mandate. And she'd been working in a hospital for years and years and years and years. There was no thank you. There was no goodbye morning tea. It was almost like she was given her marching orders. And she's like, I've worked my ass off. I've saved people's lives for this, and this is how I get treated. And so, like, nurses over here are hurting, and I'm not sure about what it's like over there.
Yeah, and it's that's a conversation that I'm really trying to remain in so that I can stay constant with what it is that nurses need in this moment. And it's really heartbreaking because you're right. Like, we've gotten through the pandemic. Nurses were hurting before the pandemic. Nurses were already short staffed. They were already suffering with poor resources and toxic work cultures. And there's a lot of pain that's happening inside of nurses. And for some folks, they don't even recognize it yet. They don't recognize just how stressed they are and how it's showing up in the way that they interact with themselves, but then also how they interact with their patients, with their families, with their friends. And after a very short time in nursing, it starts to wear away at who you actually are as a person, and it leaves behind this hardened shell of a person.
Mm.
And it's in this area that I'm really shifting my focus to help people, because not only to help the nurses, but to help them, whether they want to stay in the medical field or whether they want to shift into another field, but then also how can we start to heal the healthcare system? And just as you've said, the nurses are the backbone. They're not getting the recognition and they're not getting the pay. Uh, and that's why a big group of nurses, I mean, in 2020, over 100,000 nurses left. Since 2020, over 100,000 nurses have left, and that's only between 2020 and 2022. And so
Mm.
now we know more and more nurses are leaving, and there's a shortage of nurses everywhere. The patient to nurse ratios in most places, because there's not a mandate, there's not a law that says patient to nurse ratios have to be a specific number, except in a very few states. Um, it's very scary for nurses, and it's very scary for patients as well.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's got that flow on effect because if you've got, high needs patients and you don't have the staff to be able to support them, like it's a scary thought to think, that things could happen and go wrong. And, the nurses that are having to work, so much overtime, they're not getting their rest, they're exhausted. And that's where mistakes can happen as well. That can look like, dishing out incorrect medication or, giving things to wrong patients. I've been on the receiving end of that. I was a kid and I had a cannula in my hand. I can't remember, I was in hospital. I had a cannula in my hand and this different nurse to my usual nurse came in and put something in my hand and I had a reaction to it. I remember that. And they were like, oh gosh. So yeah, it was a thing. But that's the thing, and this was a very long time ago. But these things happen, and I think we're gonna, if we're not already seeing it in the industry, we're gonna see more of it happening because they're just so burnt out, and no one wants to go. Okay, I'll go to university for 3 years and I'll become a nurse because that's the industry I want to work in.
Yes, yeah. And that's a question that a lot of people are asking. The ones that are already in nursing school and the folks that are looking to become nurses, and they get into these conversations with folks that have worked in the nursing field for maybe 5 years or maybe it's 20 years, and then they hear all of these stories and they're just like, I don't even know if this is something I want to put myself through. And quite honestly, hospital systems, they're encouraging nurses to work way more hours than they honestly should. Um, it was something that I struggled with the entire time that I worked in the hospital. I had an hour drive to work, an hour drive out, more than an hour drive home. And at the end of my nursing career in the hospital, there were several times where I was so tired driving home, I would have to pull off just for a few minutes just to take a short cat nap just so I could get the rest of the way home. And we're talking
That's
less
true.
than 40 miles.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing, like with shift work as well. Like shift work can, which is, the case for the majority of nurses. It's not great for your body. Let's let's be honest about
No,
that. Like,
no.
your poor, circadian rhythm, your digestive system, like every system in your body takes a hit because of it. And I think it's some women spend, or men as well, some nurses
Yeah.
spend their whole lives in the nursing career, and it can take such a toll as well. There's You used to see nurse burnout happen all of the time.
Yes. Yes. And I worked nights for over 20 years, and the amount of strain that it was putting on my body, I didn't even realize until I stepped away and switched to yoga therapy. And was in that first year that I really started to see just how much of an impact shift work had been doing on my stress levels, my health, my sleep. Hindsight's always 2020. And, when I look back at some of the things that I would do, I'm cringing that, I recognized certain aspects. So, if I had worked 3 nights in a row, uh, the next day, I knew I was not safe to get behind a vehicle to drive because I was still really exhausted. And I was fortunate to have my kids were old enough to drive at that time. And so if I needed to go somewhere, I'm like, okay, come on, you're driving mom to the grocery store because I'm pretty positive I shouldn't be behind the wheel. And it's not because I
I
had
love
been
it.
drinking, it's simply sleep deprivation.
I not that I've ever, drank and drive, but I have like exhausted driven, and it is scary. It is really scary. I've been like so
Right.
sick before that I've been like delusional, and I literally had to go up the road to pick up my children who were then came down with the same flu and go and get them. And I got behind the wheel and I was like, oh my God, it's almost like I felt drunk. I felt drunk
Yeah,
because of the
exactly.
delusion of the fever that I had. Yeah.
Yes. And it just amazes me that only in the last really 10 years is the medical and the research community really talking about what sleep deprivation does to the health of our brain, not just in the immediate moment, but long term, what sleep deprivation does to our brain, and then in turn to our health. And when you talk to people in the medical field, they say things like, "Oh, I'll sleep when I'm retired," or "I'll sleep when I'm dead," and this is the mentality that is causing more suffering. It's why more people are leaning into different habits that aren't beneficial to them. It's part of that whole I'm suffering, but it's okay because I'm suffering for a good cause.
Yes, I find that in the nursing industry. Nurses are a very special breed, and I see that within my mother because she's such a selfless, giving, beautiful person. And and I see a lot of martyr syndrome in there as well. That they're so in service, but at the cost of their own health. There's actually so much self-abandonment in that as well. I don't know if that's something that you've witnessed within yourself or in the industry.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's in that capacity that I'm working with nurses specifically. I do this with all of my clients, but with nurses specifically, it seems like there's something that drew us into that particular field, and you see it in different fields. Police officers, first responders, folks in the military. They were drawn to serve, and because of that, there's this, well, if it creates pain in me, that's okay because I'm helping others. Um,
Yeah.
and there's a fine line. It's something called a healthy boundary that you can do both.
Yes,
Uh,
yes. I love that been in that medical industry for so long and that you can see that side of things, and it's like you've just come to the other side of the spectrum, looking at things from a holistic perspective. Tell me about the gap between both. Like, what is missing in that medical field that you get to experience coming from a holistic perspective of health?
a lot of it is self-awareness. There's so much that I learned in yoga therapy, wasn't taught in university, wasn't taught in nursing school. And there's a lot of things in our society where we're told to basically just suck it up and ignore it. Your body has a pain, then instead of exploring, why do I have this pain? Why do I have this sensation? We cover it up. We immediately go towards, well, let me take a pain reliever. Let me take something to, I have pain, I need to get rid of the pain. Rather than, well, why do I have the pain? What is there, a movement that I'm doing, or is there a substance that I'm around, or am I tired and or dehydrated? There's so many things, a lot similar to that, that we are taught to ignore. And the holistic mentality is, well, why is this happening? What are the choices that, or the things that we've been doing in our life that are creating this dysfunctional pattern? Is it a food that I'm eating? Is it a movement that I'm doing? Is it lack of sleep? Is it chemicals that I'm using in my house? Is it chemicals in my environment? There's so many areas where we can make slight adjustments, and there's so much more benefit in that. Things like choosing to eat whole foods instead of going through the drive-through. uh, the fact that we have more and more plant-based restaurants popping up everywhere it's speaking to the fact that people are waking up. People are getting more in tune with their body and recognizing that we have choices. We can choose the things that we do in our life, and we can choose things that are more beneficial. And when we're aware of that, that's something that isn't taught. Nurses and doctors get very few hours of nutritional training, and yet everybody goes to nurses and doctors and says, what are the foods that I should be eating? Yes, absolutely. Let's ask the person that's eating a Snickers bar and drinking a Monster at 2 a.m. in the morning, what are healthy foods that I should be putting into my body?
Yeah, there's always, 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 always going to be a place for medical and pharmaceutical, 100% hands down. Love
Yes.
doctors, love
Yes.
nurses. And I mean, doctors are glorified drug dealers. They're actually, do you know what really pisses me off is that we call it a healthcare system and it has nothing to do with health. The pharmaceutical and medical industry is the biggest fucking subscription model of our time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're starting to see the shift in the whole medical field, where there's more doctors that are looking at the whole person, that are wanting to say, I need more than 5 minutes to spend with the patient to actually be able to find out what's happening in their life, what's the reason for their depression, what has changed in their life that now they have this issue. And we have so many more people that are speaking. They're coming out of the shadows, and they're speaking light. They're putting light on the shadows of the medical care system and saying, the things that we are doing weren't working, so why are we still doing them?
And it has to be said because at some point the system's going to implode, where it's pharmaceutical products are great for certain things, but when they're
Yes.
just being continually dished out, and like you said, there's not a lot of proper training for doctors and nurses around nutrition and holistic health, because we're led to believe that, like, it's the biggest blind side of our, I would say, the human experience is that pharmaceutical is health, because it's not. I'm over hearing that it's the healthcare system, because it's not about health at all. Like, I've got a bee in my bonnet, Eva.
I'm right there with you, because when I talk to people and I say, how do you rest? They immediately have an idea of what it is that I think I want them to say. They're like, oh, well,
Mm.
I'll do yoga, or, sometimes when I want to rest. I'm like, okay, that's an activity, that's a mindfulness practice. That's not rest. So how are you resting? Or I'll ask things like, what are the mindfulness practices that you do? And they immediately shift to, well, I don't do meditation because it doesn't work for me. And
I love that one.
yeah, and it's funny, but it's so sad because we've got these preconceived notions of what those things have to look at or look like. And folks don't realize they're already doing these things in their life, and they just need to do more of the way that they're doing it in their life. Not the way that it looks on Instagram, not the way that, somebody that's got gymnastics and dance background is doing it. Instead, how does it apply to them? And bringing it back to that holistic mentality. Self-care is their healthcare maintenance plan. And that's what I don't
I
think
love that.
enough people understand. That self-care is not selfish. It's not something that, we should do only when we can find time to do it. Instead, how do we include pieces of self-care in every single day?
Yeah, yeah, it's so true, isn't it? And it's a practice as well, especially if you've been
Yes.
so either not experiencing it or in such a minimal capacity, but it is a practice. It's something ongoing. It's the same as yoga. You don't just go into a yoga class and get on the mat and you've mastered it. It is a practice. It's something that you show up for daily. And I wouldn't, consider myself a yogi by any means. I haven't been to a yoga class for a hot minute actually. But, when I get on the mat for whatever reason, it's like, oh yeah, that's right. Like it's a homecoming. It's, and people that have that regular yoga practice, will know that time that you're on the mat is when that's your self-care, that's your mindfulness, like that's your inwards connection, your meditation, and that is your reminder to go out into the world and continue that off the mat. And then you come back to the mat to check in again. So someone with a regular meditation practice, they come back to that. And I mean, if we look at meditation, I do love when I hear people say I can't meditate, because I'm like, oh, that's cute. And the whole point of meditation is that we have over 60,000 thoughts a day. We're not designed to just turn those off. And so, what the whole idea is, coming back to your breath, coming back to that point of awareness. It's going, okay, I'm just going to sit here and I'm just going to, I might just be with my breath. And then the thoughts come in, but it's the coming back. And that's the micro to the macro. How we are in small ways is how we are in all ways. And so if we can have this regular practice, whether it's meditation or yoga, where we're present and we're doing the thing, but then we go out into the world, or we go out into the thoughts, and then we come back again, and I think that I actually refer to that as like the breath of life. It's the inhale and the exhale of life. And so we're always breathing, we're always inhaling and exhaling. And isn't it interesting, how in yoga and how in meditation, we actually use our breath as our anchor point as well. Like there's just so much within the space of the breath that can teach us so much.
There is. And every time someone says, well, just like you're saying, I can't meditate, or they say, I can't do yoga, my first response is, well, can you breathe? They would just look
Mm.
at me funny. And I'm like, well, breath, that's the biggest part of it. And one of the things that I found most amazing, I didn't learn this in nursing school, was how to apply my breath to me. How do I use my breath to create change? How do I use breath to self-regulate? And I was just talking with some folks last week, and there was an incident where somebody was being a complete tool, and
Mhm.
I didn't get riled up. I was just went through the situation at the end of the situation. I'm like, okay, have a nice day. And they're like, fuck you. And I'm like, okay, see ya. And I turned around, I walked away, and I was just like, that's a whole lot of anger that person is carrying around. Like, it's got to be miserable to be that person. And several folks said something to me, and they're just like, how? Like, how did you just do that? And honestly, I said, I don't know how. I know the why. It's been years and years coming. Like, this is something that I've been working on every time I stepped onto the mat, and every time I stepped off the mat, where I continued to use my yoga practice and I continued to use my meditation. And every time I came back to my breath, and I used my breath to self regulate, to down regulate my nervous system. And I said, it wasn't the one time that I used it. It's been the many, 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 many times that I've used it. This is just a really huge, glaring example that you got to see.
When we have these practices, they do become second nature to us. Like, we do the things so that when we need them, we've got access to that tool in the tool belt. We're not, like scrambling, like, oh, shit, 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 I'm activated or I'm triggered. Someone's upset me. What am I going to do with this? Or sit in it and fester and harbor in it. When we've got these tools already there, they just come naturally to us. And that's the whole idea of having a practice, so that it just becomes second nature. It becomes a beautiful conditioning.
Yes, absolutely. And I love how you said, while we're in that situation, we're not thinking, what did I do? How did I create? Like, how is this my fault? Instead, because we're using this practice all the time, instead, we're looking at the person, and while we're thinking, okay, this person's behaving horribly, we can also have compassion for that person, in that, we're not condoning their behavior, but we're recognizing that their behavior is 100% in their control. And it had nothing to do, regardless of what I said or what I did, that person's issues are all within them. I didn't trigger
Mm.
that. The more I can recognize things where I'm triggered, then the more I can use that practice to say, okay, that situation created this anxiety inside of me. Well, then what is it about that situation? Why did I get triggered? Why did I get anxious in that moment? Was it simply that I was hungry and I was short-tempered, or was it something deeper? And that's, something for me to work on myself.
And one of the best things I find with this, Eva, is that the part of me that is going through a process that's, perhaps been triggered or activated, as I like to say, the last thing that part of me needs is to be rejected or put down or made to be wrong. And so one of the biggest things for me in my journey and what I teach other people is to welcome all parts and love all parts and honor all parts, because the moment we make it wrong, we're just adding another layer of rejection on top. And so it's an inwards journey to say, well, what is it that I actually need in this situation? Like, how can I love so deeply on the part of me that's having this feeling? Because as soon as I can take the sting out of that activation and come from a place of self-love, that's where I'm going to be able to move forward and make more of a level-headed decision, instead of like projecting that anger that's been activated within me, instead of projecting that towards whatever it is that, that was the trigger for it. It's creating a whole new experience. And then from that, instead of sticking around and hanging out in that sympathetic nervous system response, that fight or flight mode. And then, when we're in that for too long, as you would know, all systems start to almost break down when we're hanging out there too long. So it's being able to activate that parasympathetic nervous system a lot quicker, and using my breath, using these different tools. And at the end of the day, that's going to cultivate more peace and harmony in my life. And at the end of the day, one of my highest values is peace. So that is why, that's the journey basically of doing the work. It's got everything to do with the journey, but it's also got to do with my intended positive outcome of what I want from my life. And that's just some fucking peace, right?
Yes. Yeah. Because if we're not getting rid of our suffering, if we're not recognizing where we suffer, how do we get rid of it? And a lot of times we're suffering because we don't have that self-agency. We don't recognize that we're the ones that can make that decision of, yes, I'm going to be in that particular space, or I may have to go into that space, but I'm going to put a time limit on it. I'm going to put boundaries into it, and recognize that as soon as I start to feel depleted, it's time for me to leave. And creating those healthy boundaries is something that's really important. And it's not just nurses. I think women in general have a tendency to put everybody else in front of them and put ourselves on the back burner, regardless of, what stage of life we're in. We've been taught for so long that what we think, how we feel, isn't as important as how we make others feel.
Mm-hmm. That's a big one for women, isn't it? It's huge, and it's a condition, and it's a societal thing. It's the patriarchy. It's so many systems that we have just been born into and exist in that have conditioned us this way. And now as women, we're holding hands and we're rising together, and we're going through this almighty deconditioning process.
Yes. And I love that the women of tomorrow are being raised with this idea of what I feel, what I have to say matters. And not only we're doing that for women, but we're doing that for men as well, too. We're saying you no longer need to protect women. Instead, you need to ask them what they need. And
right.
I mean, these are conversations that are starting to happen more and more. And I'm so excited for the generation that are children right now, because they're being raised with this idea that what they think, what they feel matters. Whereas, I remember, for the longest time being told, you're going to, finish school, get good grades, get a good job, meet a nice man, and then you can be happy. And I'm like, I gotta wait until then to be happy? Like, what the fuck is that?
Mm-hmm.
And
It's like
my
it's the done
happiness is
thing.
dependent on those things.
Right. And then, so by virtue of not having those things is that you get to be unhappy. And it's so fucking sad. It's sad, but do you know what? From that, we actually get to experience empowerment to create change, not only for ourselves, but for our daughters and that next generation coming through. Because I remember my first ayahuasca ceremony a few years ago. I was the loud one in the room, in the yurt. I was like kicking and screaming. Like I had all of my ancestors, all of my female lineage behind me, moving through me. And I was like roaring, "We are not okay." And I just had like this full body experience of like, fuck this. Fuck off, everybody. Like, we're not okay. Like, leave us alone. Let us do our thing. Like, let us rise together. And I get so passionate about this, as you could probably tell. And this is in alignment with the work that I do now, because I have felt the full force of my female lineage stand behind me, because I am here to be a trailblazer, a change maker, a condition breaker, all of these things. And I'm doing it like that. There's no other way. And at the same time, I am loving myself deeply. I'm nurturing myself. I'm looking after myself, and I'm caring for myself so that I can do this work, because I've dropped the martyr syndrome that has also been through my lineage as well. I think that's a big one for people in this space as well, is that if we're stepping into this space of being of service, like we spoke about earlier in nursing, put the fucking martyr syndrome down. It's not all about everybody else. In order to do this work, you have to care for yourself. That is a non-negotiable. You have to be at your best self so that you can be in service to others.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And people use the analogy of, if you're on an airplane, they always tell you put your oxygen mask on first and then help others. And
Mm-hmm.
that seems to be the only instance where it's okay to take care of yourself before taking care of others. And I love that we are getting into this realm of self-care is health maintenance. Self-care is something that we are supposed to be doing on a daily basis, and redefining what that means, and not needing anybody else's permission to listen to our own body.
It's so true. It's so true. Eva, what's one of your favorite healthcare practices that you have for yourself?
Sleep. Honestly, it's sleep.
Yes.
I have gotten rid of my alarm clock when I can. If I have to get up
Mm.
early, I'm still using 4 or 5 alarm clocks, because my circadian rhythm is naturally staying up later at night and sleeping in longer in the morning. And so one of the things that I do is I protect my sleep. I turn my do not disturb on my phone. If I don't have an early morning session with a client, then I don't set my alarm, and I wake up when I wake up. It's probably been one of the most releasing practices. I mean, there's still all the other things that I love to do. My yoga mat lives on my floor, and there may be a minute where I just drop down onto the floor and do a few movements just to feel that space in my body. But the big thing is really just learning to lean in and listen to, what do I need? If I need to take a couple hours off and just sit and chill and hang out with my little bulldog, then we do that. If it's, I want to, uh, I want to if I want to eat something that I know that's not going to be incredibly healthy for me, well, I don't do it that often, so I don't have that guilt or shame around it. Instead, it's, I'm going to eat this fucking cookie, and I am going to enjoy it because I love chocolate. And then the remainder of the week will be a lot more leaning into the fruits and veggies, and not being so upset and not being so timid with labels. That was a
Mm.
lot. That was a really
I love
long-winded
it.
answer to the one thing that I like to do.
I love it. No, it's perfect. It's perfect. One of the things that I'm asking some of my guests that are coming on, who are coaches or leaders in their field, like, I really want to start to break down the stigma that just because we teach this stuff that we have all of our shit together, because it's so far from the fucking truth. Tell us something that you're working through on a personal level. What's your shitstorm at the moment?
My shitstorm is my journaling. My journaling, I get in my journal and I will look at it and I'm like, it's been a month since I sat down with my journal. And then, so
Right.
that's been one of my things where I was sitting there today and I was just like, okay, I've got to figure out a better system, where I am doing this. You know, life happens. Life happens. We all go through these phases where life happens and certain things affect us more. And so maybe we're leaning into one area more so than others. We don't have to do all of them, right? Like
Mm.
if you're focusing on eating healthy and you're focusing on improving different habits in your life, if you don't do the 20 different things that are all considered self-care for you, you're only doing 5. Well, give yourself permission to focus in on what you need at that time. And then go back and reincorporate the other aspects. And so I think you're right. There's a stigma that we all have our shit together, and that life doesn't affect us. We don't have those moments where you can't sleep. And it's funny because as a night nurse, I can stay up till 4 in the morning, no problem. You ask me to get up at 6 in the morning, and I'm going, okay, I'm gonna have to go to sleep by this time. I'm gonna have to set this many alarms and do these backups to make sure that I actually show up, and I don't just, because I've done that. I have set several alarms and then turned them off and went back to sleep because I was in such a deep sleep at the time. So
It happens. Yeah.
it happens. And being authentic and being real about it is how this is not it's not a sprint. This is how we improve our entire life, not just this moment. It's like when you do a juice cleanse and you lose 15 pounds, and then you go back to eating the same shit that you were eating before. The 15 pounds comes back, right? So it's the same
Yeah.
thing with your meditation, your journaling, your mindfulness practices, and your healthy eating and your sleep routine. They're all things that
Yeah.
they go through an ebb and flow in our life, where sometimes your sleep routine needs more focus because you're going through some stuff that's affecting your sleep more. And then you need to focus more on your healthy eating because I don't know, maybe your mom's visiting and she's making all of your favorite foods from when you were a child, but none of them are good for you, right? So it's what do you need in this moment, and giving ourselves that permission to not be fucking perfect.
Oh, I love it. It's so true. And then it just perfect is just so unattainable and unsustainable, and this is the thing, with these self-care practices is that we want them to be, not only enjoyable but sustainable as well, so that, you will stick to it and it just becomes a part of your practice and it becomes a non-negotiable, and that you do it because you really fucking enjoy it. Like you do it because it's like, this shit feels good and I'm here for pleasure in this lifetime.
Yes, yes. And you know, it I love that we are bringing this more into the light over and over and over, where we are talking about not what it is that I do that makes me happy, but how do you pay attention and do the things that you specifically need in that moment, where it's not, and every time somebody asks this question, well, what are the best shoes to wear as a nurse? And I just want to say, can we please stop asking what's the best dot dot dot, because it's going to
Mm,
depend. It's going to depend, every single person's going to have a different answer, and every person's going to have a different need. So how do we stop asking other people what we need, and instead
mm,
How do we start asking ourselves, what do I need in this moment? And
I
then
love it so much.
listening to that.
Yeah. And then taking action from it as well. It's all well and
So,
good to think it and feel it, but if we're not actually actioning it, that's another shitstorm brewing within itself, isn't it? You know?
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, okay, and this is probably for any men that are listening, they're going to be like, no, they don't do that. Um, when you first started dating somebody and you had a problem taking a dump at anywhere near where your current person was, if they're anywhere in the vicinity, every single woman has done this, where they go off for the weekend, they come back, and the first thing they do is like run to the bathroom because they've been clinched and holding it for 2 days straight.
I'm
As
laughing
a nurse,
so
it
hard.
always it
Not only
always comes back to the bowel movements with a nurse, right? There's always it's got
right.
to sneak into the conversation. But that's the thing. Like,
I
we can't even let our body go through its normal physiological functions that's healthy for us to do. Instead, we hold it
yeah.
tight because we don't want somebody to know that we poop.
Right. It's so funny because not only do I resonate this, but I had a friend come over a couple of weeks ago and she lives with her partner. They've been living together for so long. Their house is massive. They have multiple bathrooms. She's like, I can finally take a shit at your house because I still can't do it at home. I'm like, go and shit at home. And I was the same for so long when I was it's my now ex-partner, and we had a massive house. Again, like it was like a 4-level house, and we had 3 bathrooms, and like I had the downstairs area as my office, and that was where I could like comfortably go and take a shit because it was like, oh my God, like no one can hear anything, no one can smell anything. And so funny. But guys don't care. Like why? Oh my God, this is a whole different topic of conversation. Why can't we shit? I can take a shit with my girlfriends with the door open and it doesn't matter.
They're
As
in
soon
the
as you
shower
pull
and
it,
we're in the bathroom.
as soon as you put a man in there that there's some like attraction or chemistry with, it's like, oh no, 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 we don't shit. In fact, I met a guy recently and he was telling me he's got a sticker on his snowboard that said girls don't shit. And when he was snowboarding, everyone was commenting on it with how hilarious it was because I mean, that's a thing. And it's still a thing for me. I'm not going to lie. It's like strategically, I actually had this guy came over the other day and my stomach was grumbling in the morning. I was like, don't you fucking dare. I'm like, you've got 24 hours. You hold that in. It was bad enough that my period came 2 days early. I was like, what is going on? And I'm usually so in sync with my period, and I love it and I celebrate and I honor it. But then when it's like when there's a guy on the scene and I just really want to have sex and then I get my period, I'm like, why?
Yeah, and this whole thing of, our body is this magical thing, and yet there's so many aspects of it that we're like are taboo to talk about. We don't want to let anybody know that we're on our period. We don't want to let anybody know that we had curry for dinner last night, and it's gonna
Yeah.
stink up the bathroom when we go.
And it's so funny because there's nothing better. There's no better feeling than taking a good shit.
Right. I mean, it's the ultimate letting go practice. It is the
True.
ultimate letting go practice. And what happens when we're wound up and we're tight? We can't shit. We're literally holding on to everything. It's the
It's
epitome
so
of
true.
no parasympathetic activity.
Is there anyone listening to this? Just take the shit. Like, just go and take a shit wherever you need to. We all do
Consciously
it.
on the
So
toilet.
what if it's thing? Eva, we are going to wrap this up very shortly. I've got a couple of more questions for you. We'll link to everything in the show notes, but how do people find you, work with you, and just be in your amazing little bubble?
You can find me at evazwellness.com. It's EVAZZ, because Australia,
Z.
EVZEE wellness.com. And I hold
Beautiful.
a
So we'll link to that.
free workshop that includes nurse CEUs, talking about fueling, sleep, and mindfulness practices, how to have those healthy boundaries as well.
Amazing. I love it. And one final question before we wrap this up. Eva, to you, what is the meaning of life?
Joy.
Oof.
Absolute pure joy. The things that make you full belly laugh, the laugh where you're just crying because you're so incredibly happy. How do we have more moments like that?
Yes, I love that. I love it. I love it. I love it so much. Thank you so much for being such an incredible guest. I've had so much fun with you, and thank you so much for all of the wisdom that you have imparted on me and our listeners today. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Oh, this has been fantastic. Thank you for having me here, Jen.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I hope you love the Enlightened podcast, and the biggest compliment you can give me is subscribing to this podcast, sharing it, and leaving a rating and review. Feel free to follow me on Instagram. My handle is @JenHamiltonOfficial, and the podcast handle is enlightened_podcast. You can also find the video version on YouTube on my channel. Just search Enlightened, and don't forget to hit subscribe. Have a beautiful day and enjoy living the enlightened journey of life.